Today's episode is brought to you by Silencer Central. Now, if you haven't used a suppressor / silencer, they're the same thing. If you haven't used them hunting, you need to. I recently did this and I am on board fully. Before Silencer became one of our sponsors, I was on a couple of hunts where they were using them. Here's the advantage: follow-up shots. Not only do you get that one surprise shot, you also get a second one because that animal isn't scared of the noise. They may have felt the impact, but they didn't hear the noise. Check them out. It is unreal. They are building silencers specific for hunters, lightweight, short silencers that you can put on any gun. I had an amazing conversation with Brandon Maddox, who is the CEO, founder of Silencer Central. Check that episode out, as well as check silencercentral.com and let them know that Ike sent you, and get set up today. Well, thanks for joining me today. Welcome to Eastmans podcast edition. I'm Mike Eastman, your host. Today, I have a very good friend of ours, Aron Snyder from Kifaru. If you don't know him, you've been living underneath a rock. Aron's got quite the social media presence, and he's a really interesting man. I've known Aron for probably 10 years. Has it been?
Yeah, probably more than that, actually, thinking about it.
Yeah. First time I met you was at the Denver ISE show. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Yeah. I don't go to those shows anymore, actually. I try not to.
I was going to say, bullshit. I saw you at the Hunt Expo this year.
Yeah, I went to that one. With the clothing and the backpacks or whatever, I told my crew I'd go to one, so that was the one.
That was the one, yeah.
That was the one. But.
Well, that's cool. So you've obviously made a splash in the industry, and backpacks are killing it. We're here in Riverton, Wyoming, in the headquarters of Kifaru, which is just down the road from us.
I like to call it the world headquarters. It sounds better because there's only one. So I actually stole that from John Barclow. But yeah, it's the world headquarters.
The world headquarters of Kifaru. Yeah. Oh, geez, that's cool. So, Aron, this is kind of a different little conversation. We're going to talk about who Aron is. I know a lot of these podcasts you get suckered into talking about hunting or talking about the, whatever the hot topic is at that moment, or talking about this or that. I want to talk about Aron. I want to know, where'd you grow up? When did you start hunting? Some of your most memorable hunts, what you're doing now. I know you have a really interesting life before you got, involved in Kifaru. So where did you grew up in Oregon, right?
Oregon, yep. Detroit Lake, Oregon. It's about 200. It's actually just burnt down recently.
Oh, geez.
But 200 people in my hometown, right in the middle of the Cascade Range. So like for geographically, where the Pacific Crest Trail, where it goes from Canada to Mexico, that comes through the Cascades. I'm just west of the Pacific Crest Trail. So
okay.
Is
that north of Portland then?
South. So if you look at Bend and let's say Portland and kind of drew an angled line, I'm kind of in the middle there. So it's kind of weird because there's Cascade, like there's Roosevelt's and Rocky Mountains, and then bench legs like half mule deer, half blacktail,
right
where I'm at. So they're not true Roosevelt's or true blacktail, but we're right on the transitioning from like old growth triple canopy rainforest into like more central Oregon. But yeah, an interesting place to grow up. The lake was like, I think it's 9 miles long or whatever the hell it is that I lived on. Had, a lot of, if you can imagine, there's not a lot of anything to do but fishing and hunting. So,
right.
Big wilderness area right there where I'm at as well. So I kind of grew up. Well, you can appreciate this. Like my daughter asked when I think she was 12. She's like, "Dad, did you have a job when you were 12?" I'm like, "Kaylee, I was falling trees when I was 12." Like,
yeah, that's
we split firewood for fun in the summer. Like, yeah, I was
for
working.
fun, yeah. AKA warm our house all year.
Yeah. Well, it's not to jump up subject. We have my wife did a custom home here, and she put a fireplace in it. But for her, that's a scenery thing, right? And so
you just look at that as work.
Well, she was like, should we, it'll be fun to go, get firewood. I'm like, no, we're paying somebody to bring that shit in. I'm not going to go split firewood anymore. I hate to sound like a weenie, but I'm like, one, it's an epic time suck, but I'm like, honey, we were splitting wood for 4 families, and that was our primary heating. And so like, it's obviously now I've gotten lazier or whatever. Like I'm like, yeah, I don't want to drive into the woods and split firewood. So we had somebody deliver the wood. So when we first got it, I like loaded up the first night. I loaded up the stove, obviously, then dampened it down, and she's like, "What are you doing? Why are you putting that much wood in there?" And she's like, "You just turn it off." And I'm like, "Well, the idea here is to save on the heating bill." Like I'm,
She's like,
loading
no,
her-
it's not. It's ambiance.
yeah,
Wait,
exactly. Yeah. So I was explaining to her whatever, like how the stove works and dampening it down and the different wood to burn. Because like, I tell you what, if I'm going to become a professional wood splitter here, like if I lose my job, what they charge for a cord of wood, I'm like, that's good side money. So things have changed, but yeah. Anyway,
Of course, it's a little different. Gathering wood here is a little different. It's a lot further to the forest.
Yeah.
You have to deal with bears. You have to deal with the Forest Service craziness. And the trees are a lot different. So it's a little harder. But
Yeah.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
We. I don't think you're a weenie. I don't think you got lazy. I think you just got older in a different place in your life and decided my time's better spent, I don't know, building backpacks or yelling at people on social media or something.
Yeah.
Versus chopping wood.
Definitely not at the top of my list to go split wood again. And I think though, when you're raised like that, it gives you an appreciation, obviously, much different and different optics from others. Because like we were raised pretty poor. I picked mushrooms for school clothes, so we like chanterelle mushrooms. And anyway, there was mushroom buyers or whatever, and so for me to have new school clothes, I had to mow lawns, pick mushrooms, split firewood. Total different world than what we live in now, in a lot of ways, anyway.
But it gave you perspective. It gave you perspective so that when you got 40 something, you go, I don't want to split any more firewood. I've been there, done that, and that wasn't that much fun.
Yeah, well, and I think too, like with how I got to where I'm at was pretty much luck, but hard work fixes a lot of problems. I barely graduated high school.
Really?
It was rough. When my mom say my GPA was like 3 sacks a game or whatever her. But I didn't do that well in school, and then I joined the Army, and I was in the Army. I ended up getting out after my second reenlistment and didn't really know what I was going to do. And so like running a company, like I wasn't prepped for any of this, but I've just found like if you just work hard enough, that solves a lot of problems. And it's amazing just labor pool now trying to find people. A lot of people just don't want to work anymore. So
yeah.
I'm sure you guys run into the same thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So you were in the Army for two enlistments. What'd you do for them?
12 Bravo. It's that was my primary MOS. So it's kind of like infantry with explosives. Would be the easiest way to explain it. Anybody that's in the military is probably yelling at me right now. So it's way cooler than that. But and when I got out of the Army, I was actually getting migraines. A guy fired off a rocket and blew the hell out of me. And I did a podcast actually with a guy I was stationed in Korea with that ended up. I guess he was a command sergeant major, or anyway, very high ranking. I was amazed because we drank a lot in Korea together. That he actually made it through. So anyway, he actually strongly urged me when I was in to get out. He was like, "Man, you're a good soldier, whatever, but you don't belong in the Army. You need to go hunting, right?" And
really?
So when I was getting the migraines or whatever, he had kind of was like, "Man, you're destined to live in the woods. Like, don't whatever." So anyway, I got out of the Army, and I really didn't know what I was going to do. I worked at an archery range for a while, and then I ended up having a guy that came in that owned a large commercial glass shop, so high rises or whatever. And he hired me, took really good care of me, married with a kid, right? And couldn't really, kids, right? Life.
Yeah.
Slow,
yeah.
slow, especially when you're on a poverty level budget.
Yep.
Speeding this story up a little, I got divorced. And when that happened, I was kind of like, okay, I'm going to do what I want to do. And so what I had found was if you get to where you're so good at your job, they can't fire you. Like you can always be fired, but
Yeah.
if you're valuable enough, you can take 3 months unpaid, a year off, and they kind of have to hire you back. Now you may not be at a high level, you're probably going to give up some promotions and things like that. But if you're valuable enough, I could get away with a lot.
There's always a job.
Yeah, and so I was able to take, 60, 90 days a year off to go hunting. Obviously low budget stuff, over the counter, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, that went on for a while, and weird story, and I don't think I've ever told you this. I've talked about it on a podcast before. I had decided I was going to quit construction like blind and find a way to make it in the outdoors. And I have a lot of people that get a hold of me that say, "Hey, I want to work in the outdoor industry." like, well, what do you want to do? Like, I don't know
What
that
does
that's
that mean?
yeah. Like, do you want to go work retail and sell back? Like, what do you want to do? And like, well, what did you want to do? And I said, look, I didn't want to work in the outdoor industry. That was the biggest difference and why I'm probably not the best person in the position I'm in. I wanted to be outdoors.
Yeah.
So there, big difference. So whether I was working as a guide or whatever, commercial fishing part of the year and then taking a time off, I just was like, I'm going to figure it out. The day that I was going to quit, I ripped my left bicep off at work.
Oh my gosh.
I had never
In construction.
in construction. It was a big piece of glass, and I was wingspanning it, handing it to a guy in a scissor lift, and just popped my bicep off. And I didn't. I'd never been unemployed, and I'd never been injured, so I was like, "How the hell does this work?" Right? Having had run the shop before, I knew I needed to go take a piss test and the normal stuff, but I found out quickly that you go to rehab, physical therapy for how much time. Well, I'm speeding this up. We got
Careful
done
about saying rehab real close to a piss test.
Yeah, no shit. Right?
You're talking about rehabilitating your arm from popping your bicep. Did you have to have surgery on it?
Oh, it ripped it off. It was up in my armpit.
Oh, jeez.
And it was funny when I popped it off. The guy that was in the scissor lift with me, Adam Goldsmith, super close buddy, kind of a quiet dude. When I had set it down, and at that time I was probably a pretty big dude lifting wise or whatever. He was kind of giving me crap about it, and I'm like, dude, I fucked myself up. I was like, something's wrong.
Yeah.
It was snowing. He pulled my jacket off, and he started. It was
It balled up,
coiled up in my armpit.
Oh, yeah.
And
I've seen it twice.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
No.
And so I was like, well, what the hell happens now? So I'm like, well, so I'm not quitting today. I was like, holy cow. So went through physical therapy, and I wrote a lot of articles. I sold a couple designs, which I'm still under an NDA with that, but sold some designs to other companies to just get some money coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of working for Kifaru at that time, but very little money. I was just helping out Patrick. So when we got done, the lady and I had become friends from Pinnacle Assurance, this insurance company that handles workman's comp. She's like, okay, you're going to get released to go back to work next week. And she's like, so we need to go through the process. You get $15,000. And I'm like, me being probably overly honest, I was like, I'm healed.
For what?
Yeah. She's like, well, no, that's just how it works. That's the dollar. You cut a toe off, it's this amount of dollars. And I was like,
there's a matrix for this.
You're going to pay me? I was like, holy cow. So she was like, yeah, you get $15,000, but you get, I don't want to misquote this, it's been a while, another 10 if you sign this piece of paper that says you'll never come back on workman's comp. So I'm trying to wrap my head around this. I'm like, so wait a minute, you pay me more money because how's this work again? She's like, well, we have people, lazy people, that will never come back to work and just milk it. You're signing that you'll never come back to workman's comp. And I'm like, but if I have problems, I can use my normal insurance. She's like, yeah, of course. Like, your insurance will handle it. And I'm like, well, I need the money. I'll sign that piece of paper. And I was nervous if I was going to get in trouble if I didn't come back to work because I didn't know legalities. I'm like, hey, if I don't come back to work, do I get in trouble? Of course, she's giggling, like, what an idiot. Like, of course not. She's like, hey, I probably shouldn't even talk about this because she get if they look to get in trouble. She's like, let me call you privately because they record all these conversations.
I'm going to call you from my cell phone.
So she did, right? She called me on my cell. She's like, look, I'd be honest, I wouldn't go back to work for that asshole either. And I'm like, damn, my buddy, right?
Yeah.
Got buddy. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, well, he's fighting your claim. I was like, I lied to OSHA for this dude. I was like, what do you mean? Because I didn't want to get him into trouble. So, and I'd run a lot of big jobs for him. Well, what it was is he was basically stating from my previous steroid use that I'd ripped my bicep off
because of that.
And I'm like, man, my buddy ripped his off shoveling snow, and he's never seen the gym. I'm like, and so they reevaluated me to see if there was any damage from taking steroids, and I hadn't taken them that long. So one thing was cool. They did a whatever on my shoulders. Because from shooting a bow, I was thinking maybe that was
right.
Especially at that time, I shot 90 to 100 pounds. I had shoulders like an 18-year-old kid, but I had some complications when they did the surgery they didn't know about yet when they dissected it more. I think the bone suture was rubbing on the tendon. Something anyway. I got some more money from that.
Oh, geez.
So then OSHA reinvestigated. I did not tell a lie on that go round because I think per OSHA, it's 50 or 75 pounds per person for a lift. Well, I had taken a scissor lift, and anybody listening in has done this, I'm sure, that's done construction. I cowboy clamped 2x4s on the side of it,
Yeah.
turned it into a forklift.
Yep.
So what had happened, he had underbid the job. Me being strong, working well, he should have been a 4-man set. It was two. So you put a glass cup, suction cup in the middle at the top. I wingspan it, herk it up. The guy in the middle grabs it, curls it. We get it on the forklift. I run up in the forklift. Instead of 4 guys, it's 2.
Right.
Well, that piece of glass was 275 pounds.
Holy cow.
When all that had happened, when OSHA re-investigated, you're not supposed to turn your scissor lift into a forklift, for one, and then 2, the weight of the
Right.
glass, all that. So I never came back to work, and I got that money. So I had, between selling some designs and that money, maybe like 50 grand, I guess, to work with. And then my relationship with Patrick grew, and I started working more with Patrick. But I didn't really have a plan, right? Like, you watch on social media, there's all kinds of like motivational shit people need to function or whatever. And I've had people ask me, and I was like, my only plan was to just do epic shit. I just wanted to hunt, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to go fishing, hunting, live in the woods. And they're like, well, I mean, did you plan on being here? I'm like, I don't know if you just heard what I said. I had zero plan. Like, I just wanted to be in the outdoors, and by default, like, I didn't plan on anybody knowing me, right? I didn't want to be Insta famous or what. I didn't, which is probably why I'm in trouble, and a lot of people dislike. I talk a lot of shit, you know what I mean? And I'm very blunt, and so I didn't, like, you look at a guy, if you were quiet, right, and you just went with the flow, you'd probably be a lot better off than you would be than the route I went, right? Because there's a lot of people that dislike me because I do talk a lot of crap, and but I didn't want to change who I was throughout all of this, and I would say I haven't, but I could have picked an easier road to walk down than the way I did it.
That's why you and I get along so well, Snyders. You and I are both blunt. I just don't do it on social media because I have a problem with social media.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of it too is like, when you're like, I've tried to surround myself with people that'll tell you you're an idiot, right? Sometimes you need a buddy to be like, hey, whether it be your wife or a buddy. Well, then I kind of I'm the same way, and I've lost a couple of friends from that. Not like horribly, but like distanced themselves, where I gave them my opinion, they didn't like it, and we kind of separated. But the thing is like, when you do, and I'd be curious, like, you and Dan are both here. Dan's behind the camera. The longer you do this, in my experience, the more jaded you get.
Yes.
And when I say jaded, I can't get on a social media forum ever anymore. Like, I can't even read them, especially when I have to read about myself. And a lot of that is from Ike Eastman's experience. You have a high level, or Dan Picard, a very high level of how to put an animal on the ground, how to run a company, what gear it takes, what bullshit you're seeing on social. So when you see that, you do have a lot of people now. You and I've made the choice. I don't comment.
Right.
But then you have people that have chosen to comment, and sometimes those comments are not overly bright. And for a while, I felt compelled to respond to those comments. I don't do that anymore. And so
that burner was hot.
Yeah. Well, you just, when somebody says, hey, what gear do I need to go on a backpack hunt? I give them the gear, and that's not up for debate, right? That's the gear that I feel you need.
It's my opinion. You asked my opinion. I gave my opinion. Why are we debating this?
And when you put it on public forum, when that guy asks, then you put it on there to help him.
Right.
You have a lot of other people comment in with very little knowledge. Yeah. Not everyone. There's some people who have a ton of knowledge, but some of the more higher level killers that I know don't do the social media thing. Guys that I take advice from or whatever, or have a small social media following. But if you look at social media now, if you have a big following, 180,000 followers, and then you take a true killer that has let's say 1,400.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to listen to that guy with 1,400 because public perception is the person with more followers knows more.
Yeah.
And it's not the case. And so I've had over the years to kind of wrap my head around that and evolve a little bit and chill out as well, because it's just not really worth it. So like what you guys do and what I do now, I just post up the info and post and ghost, just walk away.
Yep.
But yeah, I didn't plan on getting to where I'm at, and a lot of luck came into play. A lot of it was luck because there's not that many people get paid to hunt, right? You just don't. And so
It's hard. It's hard to get there.
yeah, it is. It's a tough road to hoe. And the one thing I have found that you appreciate, there's more loyalty. I had a lot of people offer me jobs when I worked for Patrick to leave Kifaru. The one thing I never forgot was I wouldn't have got those jobs, opportunities, if it wasn't for Patrick. So I never left him.
Yep.
No matter what happened or whatever, I would not have been in the position. I would have still been swinging a hammer, right?
Yeah.
And so I never forgot that. I think that's helped out. When I say loyalty, obviously, I mean, you know, business things and different companies you use, that stuff changes all the time. But like someone that's truly helped you out, you need to stay loyal to that person. And I think you guys have been screwed as much as anyone. Build somebody up.
It happens with 3 generations.
Yeah. I mean, like you build somebody up, then they leave you to the grass is greener.
We call it people, you know, you've done with Patrick, you did a really good job of remembering who bring you to the dance and not bailing on the, you know, for the first shiny object. And that's really important. And in order to be successful in this industry, because as you know, it's a really small industry, a really small industry, that's really important. And it goes a long ways, even with, you know, jumping from, you know, you were just talking about jumping from one sponsor to another, or, you know, using this gear versus that gear. Those things happen, and sometimes they're a business decision. Sometimes they're a personal decision. You know, the company's taken a different direction, or the gear took a different direction, or, you know, hey, this just doesn't fit me anymore. Yeah, that stuff happens. But being loyal is nothing's changed. You know, as long as everything's the same, there's loyalty, and you have to, like everything, you have to maintain those relationships, just like your marriage or just like your relationship with your kids. And it's really important in this industry.
It is. And I think the one thing that people, because of how social media is, I test a lot of gear.
Yeah.
And so people have gotten more used to it now, but just because today I'm wearing a Crispy boot, and then last week I was wearing a Zamberlan or, you know, whatever. It's like, hey, that last product I used wasn't bad. The way I work, if I'm talking about it, it's good. But I test a lot of products and relationships. And anyway, and it's like when someone, because of how the industry has worked, sometimes when you switch a product, it's a negative connotation to it. It's like, oh, that they paid that guy more or whatever.
Right.
And it's not always the case. Sometimes it's the case, but sometimes like it may just be marketing has gone a different direction.
Yeah.
And so, like, hypothetically, I'm using brand X Aero.
Right.
And their budgets get cut or whatever. You have a choice at that point. You know, for me, like, obviously, I don't take a ton of money, but I have endorsement contracts with some. If that product is that good, I'll stay with it, you know, whatever.
Right.
But in reality, it's like, well, you know, if there's another product and that company likes me, there's a good relationship there. Well, why wouldn't I switch, right? Or you or anybody else, right? It just makes sense. So it's a weird deal because some of the things that I see or have seen over the years, how marketing and social media and the perception of certain things, it kind of like, it's like bell bottoms, right? Like they were cool a while ago and they're coming back, right? And so there's
just wait, that stuff's coming back around.
Yeah. It's well, and you even gear. When you look at I don't know what's his name over there making fun of a 6.5 Creedmoor. That's the man bun of the. I'm not a rifle guy. That's the man bun of the outdoor world now, I think, right?
Yeah,
like, you know. Yeah. But how many? When you think about it, like, how many animals have died from 30-06?
Yeah, a lot.
How often do you hear about a 30-06 now?
Almost never.
And
it's not the shiny object.
No. And so, and as I say that, I had a 6.5 PRC built for me because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, hey, what do I want? And they're like, you want a 28 nozzler? It's a barrel burner, 6.5 PRC. I'm like, whatever you think, I'm an archer.
Yeah.
It works, but I don't shoot. Like people's, going off the deep end here, most people don't have the bandwidth, including myself, to take a long-range shot.
Yeah.
So if you ask a guy like, I don't know if you guys are familiar, buddy of mine, John Pinch, really good shooter, great hunter, whatever. if you ask John, like, hey man, I want to set up a brand new rifle, whatever, what's your farthest shot? 300 yards. And then he's going to laugh at you and say, shoot whatever you want.
Yeah,
like,
you can shoot anything at that.
A 308, right? Like,
Yeah, right.
Like, and so some of those different things, there's like the tried and true, it's not new and shiny, so it gets overlooked. And I've seen that happen a lot, especially designing gear. Like, I have to make new packs, whether they're better or not. If someone thinks they're better, that's all that matters. But it's the new shiny thing. You've probably had to deal with that more than anyone, because you've been doing this a lot.
Well, and
than me.
you know, you get used to something. Archery equipment's a perfect example of that. You get used to shooting a bow, and then every year they come out with a new bow, and you go, well, that's just the same bow with different holes in the riser.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna do it every 3 years because I'm tired of setting bows up and getting used to them.
Yeah. And if you're into tuning bows, like I love it. But if somebody said, hey, you need to go throw a rifle scope on this rifle, go bore sight it, get it dialed in, figure out your dopes, I'm like, man, why don't you just give me a bottle of scotch and a handgun? That is not me. You know, I don't want to mess with that. And so, like the rifle I have now, I don't clean it overly often. Rides in the back of a can. It's a guide rifle. It's made for generally finishing off Aoudad specifically. They're tough animals. And I'll have people message me because of my presence. Hey, what rifle should I buy? I'm like, I have no idea. I don't. I am the wrong guy to ask. Well, I've seen you've shot some things with the rifle. I'm like, yeah, because I had to. Like, I'm not the guy, but because of the presence I have, I'm like, man, I can think of, on a drunken stupor, 50 people better than me to answer this question. Like, I don't ask me, but because I have a following, people, you know, and I'm sure you guys get it a lot.
Yep.
But,
well, and I was to tease the man bun of the rifles, and I am one of the first people to tease the 6.5. But I was one of the first people to shoot it on camera, honestly. And I've been shooting it for 15 years almost. And it is, you know, it is my go-to for antelope and deer, just because I'm comfortable with it. I understand it. I have lots of ammo for it.
Yeah.
And you know, I like but there's limitations to everything. It's not the one and done. I wouldn't shoot an elk with it. I just wouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what Whitwer, he makes fun of it about elk or whatever, but it's no different. Like Dan shoots a light arrow, or I think you shoot a light fast arrow. I shoot, what do you shoot? Yeah, so moderate. Yeah, and I'm like 475 to 5, and so the thing is, and a rifle's no different for a lot of animals. Yeah, it really doesn't matter if you just hit them correctly. Right. And people, this is another thing that you run into on social or whatever else is, people worry about a lot of things that are of very little importance in comparison to actually accuracy. Yeah. So they'll run a chart to me of 30 different arrow options and vane configurations and all of these other things. And I'm trying to be as polite as I can. I'm like, how's your groups? Like, what do you mean? I'm like, how are you as a shooter? Yeah. Well, and they'll tell me, I'm like, well, you know, you should probably just pick one of those arrows and then learn to shoot a bow, get a coach, because accuracy and, you know, having that bow be an extension of your body.
Well, 80% of accuracy is the human condition.
Yeah, it's generally the well, I can't say that because I'll get in trouble, but yeah, it's the guy behind the bow. Yeah. You know, and you know, with that, like when you're looking at getting into the outdoors, and this is something that I try to press upon people. There's nothing wrong with being fit, right? Fitness is good. Right. There's nothing wrong with having good gear. That's important. But if you rewind, right, let's say 30 years, like, you know, there was people getting it done with really subpar gear to today's standards. Nothing wrong with camo, but you know, antiquated clothing, but they knew animal behavior, right? They knew 100%. Woodsmanship. And I get your perspective on that with the CrossFit Hurricane flipping tire thing over. And I work out every day. I'm like, I work out. I think people forget that actually knowing the animal is as important as anything else.
Yeah. And you can, the time spent in the woods, understanding animal behavior, understanding woodsmanship, like you called it, is basically how drainages work, how wind works, how, you know, what to look for, you know, that animal's behavior in this certain area. You and I were talking before we turned on about mule deer, and you were on its hunt and said if that deer gets in that, you know, in that chunk of timber, you're screwed. He'll never come out of there during the daylight. And that type of stuff is you're way more suited for success if you learn that stuff versus flipping tires. I'm not saying you can't flip tires, and I'm not saying you shouldn't be in shape, because getting there is half the battle. But you don't have to be able to run marathons. You don't have to be able to, do 2,700 deadlifts to get there, to get it done, because there was people my dad's age that did it in blue jeans and, a flannel shirt, and they were killing, honestly, statistically, if you look at the Boone and Crockett, they were killing bigger deer, bigger elk.
Yeah, yeah.
And bigger deer. I don't know about bigger elk. That's a whole
definitely bigger
deal.
deer.
Yes.
But when people hear podcasts like this, and I immediately get like that tooth nerve response.
Yeah.
It's like, man, there's probably something there on your side that you might want to think about. Because if this comment, like if I call somebody fat and they get super defensive, they're probably fat.
They probably are.
Yeah. So, and I make fun of myself about being, recovering fat kid, but if it wasn't for fat shaming, I wouldn't be in shape now.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm, let's say, animal behavior shaming you, and, I look on your social and you got 75 gym selfies, but no time in the field.
Yeah.
You might want to take, and this goes for me too. Like, I've went down every rabbit hole you about could. And so, if somebody's like, oh, you're arrogant about that. And it's like, take for the context it's in. I have screwed up so much that I'm helping you not screw up what I have. And I did the gym thing for a long time, worried about fitness. But the one thing that's always saved me is knowing where animals live and how they behave. And a good example, go into a high country basin with the most lush feed known to man. Depending upon the egress potential around that basin and a few other things, that doesn't mean deer will live there.
No.
You can't just have the food. If they got nowhere to run, they're not going to live there. They got to escape.
Yep.
And you can look at that from a map and see some of it, right? But like technology wise, like Spartan Forge and Onyx, they're awesome software. But it has taken away that maybe fieldcraft, woodsmanship portion of getting out there.
Well, and to your point about walking in a basin and it looks like, man, this really looks deery, doesn't mean there's deer in there. And honestly, one of the things that people overlook with animal behavior is they are, there's they think they call the rose petal scenario where, a doe takes her fawn into a certain place in the summer, a certain place in the winter, and that fawn will do the same thing over and over and over again. So you could look at one basin and there'll be 0 deer in it, and the next basin's chock full because there's a generation of deer in there. Yeah. And the first basin might be the exit plan. Might be, if things go bad here, we're going over there.
Yep. And
understanding that, not beating your head against the wall, going, well, there's nothing in here. There should be something in here, and just keep moving around a little bit.
Yeah.
But everything's a pendulum. Doesn't mean you go run around and blow every basin in the range out either.
Yeah. Yeah. And, people ask that question, and, on the high country deer thing specifically is like, at a minimum, I want to give it a night and a morning, an evening and a morning before I move.
Yep.
I have had way better luck in the mornings than the evenings, seeing deer for the most part. And, the other thing too with that is like when you come from like out of state, when you said getting there is half the battle. The first time you go, it might be more than half the battle because you may not get there.
Right.
And I get that, and I'm sure I used to play college football. I'm going on a 14-day backpack hunt. I'm like, yeah, no, you're not. You have the ambition to do that.
Right.
14 days is a long time living off your back. So it's like, hey, break her down to 5 days.
Start at 3.
Yeah, lower. Yep, 100%. And come out for a day, eat a cheeseburger, shower, head back in. But what people have to realize, like getting there with an 80-pound pack or 70-pound pack is a lot more difficult than you realize until you get in the altitude and the terrain, lactic acid buildup. Well, then once you're there, if you're done, right, and you can't move around and shift, there's a lot of dynamics to it. So you do need to be in shape and pace yourself or whatever. But once you get there, and we see it a lot, where do I camp?
Yeah.
Well, don't camp in the basin the deer live in. That's bad.
Yeah.
How far away from the deer do I camp? How far away from the elk do I camp? Like you can't learn that from a book because every situation is different.
Yes.
Well, and you've
That's
hunted
instincts.
Yeah, definitely instincts. And you guys have hunted all over the place. Every state you can get away. Yeah. I mean, you hunt Pacific Northwest Roosevelts. They don't blow out.
Yeah.
It's thick. They don't run that far.
They don't have to.
You can track them. You blow a deer out or an elk out in Colorado in the high country.
you're done.
You're still watching it run 20 minutes later. Like it's just a different scenario.
Well, and even state to state, you go from Colorado versus Wyoming, and just because the terrain's different, the vegetation's different, the animal behavior's different because they react differently. You know, Colorado doesn't have wolves and bears, and so their reaction to a predatory threat is completely different than it is in Wyoming or Idaho or anywhere else. And so that's just instincts, and the only way you can get instincts is time in the field.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think when you like with what we're talking about, kind of with the industry and things changing, what have you, even though you're interviewing me, what have you seen? What are your opinions that has changed the most for you and the company in the last 10 years?
Gear.
Gotcha.
And so here's what's I answered this question just recently, had this big in-depth conversation. Somebody said, why is it that if you look at the number of tags that are being allocated across the western states, they're less than they were 10 years ago, but there's more hunting pressure? It seems like there's more people in the field. I said, there's two things. And we were talking about this earlier too, is somebody might draw a tag and him and his 5 buddies go hunting.
Yeah.
That's more people. That didn't happen 10, 15 years ago. Not as much. The other thing that's happened is gear. You know, we were just talking about a guy going in there 14 days, 5 days, 3 days. You know, 15, 20 years ago, before there was technical clothing, before there was really technical boots and stuff that was built specifically for hunting, sleeping bags, tents, backpacks, you name it, all that stuff didn't, you know, you were using handing down stuff or stuff that wasn't built specific for that. And so it wasn't a comfortable experience back there. And now with technical gear, you can spend more days in the field, which then if, you know, let's say you had a 2-week season 20 years ago, those guys drew that tag, but they might go in there overnight, maybe 2 nights, you know, a 3-day hunt, and then they're out, you know, burger shower, maybe go back in. Maybe it was too hard because it was just a completely uncomfortable experience. Now they go in there for 4 or 5 days. They've got mountain house meals. They weren't eating MREs. They weren't sleeping under a half-assed freaking bivy sack tent that leaked like crazy and condensated. And I mean, all of those things. That's one of the things that has changed a lot in the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah, it definitely has. And I mean, even on the design portion of what we do, like, you know, competition, obviously all, you know, whatever, what's that? I can't remember. I'm screwing that up. We have to stay very sharp. One of the reasons why we moved here was expansion and R&D, and like, so we have to stay at the tip of the spear when it comes to durability, lightweight, everything.
Yeah.
And so when you look at 10 years ago, let's say, a lightweight pack 10 years ago or so, when I say a lightweight hunting pack, was 7 pounds or something.
The average was like 9.
Yep. You know, 6, 7 was pretty light.
Yeah.
You know, then fast forward now, you're looking at 4 to 5, right?
And if you're at 6, you're in the average, and there's people going, can't you make it lighter?
Well, I mean, we shows all day long. It's a little heavy. I'm like, it's 6 pounds, 12 ounces. Like, I've taken a shit that weighs half that. Like, are you kidding me? But I have to remember, like, okay, things have changed in materials. And the other thing too is the public perception on the marketing side of things is a big part of it. And so when you look at like, how the hell did we pack an animal out without a load shelf? You couldn't do it, I guess. I mean,
it was horrible.
And so I was like the load shelf thing now, like I have a 7,400 cubic inch bag I had to change and sew a load shelf on. And I'm like, what are you doing with this pack, right?
Yeah,
like
what couldn't you put in that bag?
Oh yeah, and again, public perception and everything else of what you need or have to have, and then, you know, one of the things we're all getting into trouble or whatever, arrogance or whatever is I'm like, I pack out 40 to 60 animals a year.
Yeah,
I cut the load shelf off my bag that I had to have sewn on. Like, we cut them off. I do, and I'm like, and I'm still packing all these. I've obviously found a way. It's what I'm comfortable with. Doesn't mean the way I'm doing it is correct.
It's the way you're doing it, though.
But the perception of it is huge. And so you go back, think like you guys. What's that one from? You guys use Mainframe Everly stock?
Yeah,
little shelf on that, right? Yeah. Pretty much all you had back in the day was like a Camp Trails kind of frame deal, and
Allison, that was what it was.
Yeah, and so now, like, it is a gift what people have now. Rangefinders.
Oh my gosh.
That
Yeah,
is
optics, period.
the biggest change I would say in the last 30 years was a rangefinder in the sense of like altered
Right.
hunting,
Right.
and not just with a bow.
Yeah.
Like I've with the bow, obviously the first year that giant Bible of a Bushnell Pro 500 came out with the one eyeball. Like I remember, I think I roofed a house and helped put a deck in to afford one of those. It was at Walmart.
Yeah.
I killed an antelope that year though because I needed a rangefinder. Because you can imagine now, like out in the Eastern Plains, right? It's 57 yards. I don't think the Levi Morgan would get it right. Like,
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now I know. Well, then I went on a sheep hunt with a buddy with this brand new thing. It didn't have angle comp, and I didn't know about cut charts. It's like a 40-some degree angle, and he's winging arrows 7 feet over the back of the sheep. This piece of shit doesn't work. Oh, there's math. Jesus,
we have to do math now?
Yeah, exactly. So
in the heat of the moment?
next thing you know, I'm gluing a clinometer on the side of my rangefinder, running a cut chart on my forearm before they had angle comp. Now they have angle comp, but it's figured out off of the Pythagorean theory, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah.
Then that's not right after 22 degrees and 70 yards. So now we have optics companies that, I worked with a company last year to design, you guys work with SIG, don't you?
Yeah.
So SIG calls me, they want to come out with one. And I'm like, we got to run the math. So they have 3 dorks, run all the math. Now they have one that's as accurate as my clinometer mathematical cut chart. That's just in the last few years as far as rangefinders go, where go back to you and your grandpa and your dad, 200 yards was
you didn't trust yourself beyond that anyway.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like
the gear didn't do it. You didn't have a rangefinder that could do it. It was pointless. And you talk about rangefinders. Let's talk about binoculars. Holy buckets! Just binoculars now. Now you have binoculars. SIG's got binoculars. You can click the range through. Ranges, and then it adjusts your scope for you.
Yeah.
It's just technology, and where the end is, where the line is, I don't know. I have my own ideas, and I'm willing to debate it with anybody, but I don't know. It is moving.
I can tell you, like my line crossed. The Garmin Zero that crossed the line for me.
100%. I agree with you. 100% on that.
And it's crossed the line with the BDX systems for me when it drops the dot for you. And when I say that, I think if you could limit it to coyote hunting, I don't give a shit if you use one for coyote hunting. But when you hit that easy button, right, that takes away, and where people get frustrated at this, where I look at it is the amount you learn you're missing, right?
Yeah.
Like you're missing time behind the rifle. You are missing the woodsmanship, the holdover, learning what you have to do, understanding the rifle or the bow. You're missing all of that, which makes you a better woodsman, better hunter.
Yeah.
And so you're skipping all of that. And so where that Garmin Zero, it's like, look, if you're down to using that, I get that's your deal. I'm not making a huge, but it's crossed the line for me.
Yeah.
Well, people are like, well, you have Swarovskis or SIGs or Pickett, right? Gore-Tex, whatever, Cryptic. It's like, well, yeah, okay. I get kind of your argument, but it doesn't move my pin for me and shoot the animal for me. Like literally with that sight, it has taken any fieldcraft away from the experience. BDX is kind of the same way for big game for me.
Yeah, and you can go to the next step and say where does the line stop? Is the rifle going to shoot for you? Or you can go, well, the other side of that argument is, the BDX moves the dot, but it's no different than your turret. You screw the turret down. Yeah. Okay, there's what they've done is they have eliminated the possibility for mistakes. And is that a line that's crossed? And everybody has to decide that for themselves, in my opinion. Yeah. I have my own, long range shooting. What is long range to you? Maybe different than me. And what does that mean? And the game agencies have some. There's the Boone and Crockett, the Pope and Young world have their own, and everybody has to decide where they're at. And I don't think technology is ever going to quit. At some point we might be sitting here talking about a 1 pound backpack. I don't know what that looks like, but I mean, where's the end of it? I don't know.
Well, and I mean, coming from a position of going from the compound to the recurve for the last 5 or 6 years, And then, this year I'm shooting a compound.
I was gonna say, I thought I saw wheels on your bow this year.
Yeah, I can tell you two primary reasons. One, I'm getting old, and it takes a lot more effort. So I had people message me this year, man, you need to get out of the office. You're not in the field enough. And I'm like, look, I hunted 5 days. I shot 4 animals. That's the compound.
Yeah.
There's not a 9-day stick bow saga going along with this, and the business is one of it, but the other is beating up my body. 2 mule deer hunts of mine, one went 14 days, one went 12. I had to go back, get more shit, and come back in to kill a deer with a stick. I would have had one dead on day 1, 2, or 3 with the compound. Now, what I learned, though, my biggest thing with the takeaway from that is obviously I had to become a lot better hunter. All the people that were giving me crap that made me prove a point with the stick was you're using technology, whatever.
Right.
They were all correct, right? I was definitely, to a certain degree,
right.
But then I proved my point, and I'm like, you could do it with a stick bow, but it also made me really look at like what's important and what people worry about a lot more than I had before. Meaning, guys worrying about whatever, you can pick at different setups and technology or whatever else. There is something to be said is just get your ass closer, right? And with rifles, like the long range thing, I have really good friends that are into long range shooting, and they're very good at it, very capable. But I also watch some of the things. I don't want to piss too many people off here. Different companies that have we're going to sell you a rangefinder, we're going to sell you a rifle, walk out in the field, range, you're good out to 700.
Yeah.
Me being a guide for some of those guys, that is not true, right? There is a skill set behind it. And if you would have dialed that gun in yourself, if you would have learned to run a ballistic turret, you probably or maybe could take that shot.
Right.
But since you skipped all that shit, now you're maybe not at the skill set you need to be to take that shot. And it's the easy button, right? They skipped all the hard parts.
So do you think that's one of the attractants to archery hunting? And then that's one of the reasons why there's guys, there's been a resurgence of stick bows, of trad bows, because guys are just honing that woodsmanship, stalking ability, and wanting to, get rid of some of that easy button. Do you think that's happening?
Somewhat. Yeah, and I think some people are just tired of jacking with the technology in general, meaning, they want a simpler system. They don't want sights or whatever else. I think that's some of it. What I have found, though, is I'll take Dan, for example, and I don't know, Dan, I think I met you one other time and I watch you on social. I give Dan a recurve, I promise you, he's killing shit. He's a killer. It's also false hope for people that maybe struggled with a gun, a compound. The stick is definitely not going to help.
No, it's going to make it harder.
But you will learn more, right?
Yeah.
You will learn animal behavior, because before, when I was at 50 yards, I would just shoot it. Yeah. Well, I may be stuck now at 50 yards for quite some time to watch animal behavior. I'm going to watch what they're doing. Stalking, patience, right? Like before, 40 yards, hang back, stands up, shoot it. Now I'm looking 20 or in. So that all changes, but there's certain people, no matter what you hand them, they're going to be very capable and be able to do it. Not everybody, if you're picked last at Foursquare, I don't want to pick up a recurve unless it's just for fun, right? I mean, that's just
maybe
life.
Tetherball is your game.
It's just like, what does Bart Lancaster say? All men were born professional dart throwers, but some just don't make the cut. Yeah. Like some people just aren't hand-eye coordination or whatever. That doesn't mean you shouldn't enjoy the sport. You shouldn't get out there, but if you're going to go from rifle to compound, you're gonna have to get closer. You're gonna have to lose the woodsmanship.
And it's woodsmanship, and it's honing that instinct. Yeah. And Dan and I had this big long conversation recently about just those instincts, and it's not overnight. You can't read a book and have instincts. You can't watch a TV show or a YouTube video or listen to a podcast and have instincts. You got to get out there and get it done. Yeah. And the more times you mess up, the more things you learn. As long as, and I tell my employees, I tell my kids this, I love mistakes. Absolutely love mistakes. The problem I have with mistakes is when you don't learn from them and you do it again.
Yeah. No, and that's 100% true. And I mean, we, obviously, like, I spend way too much time guiding down on the border of Mexico with my buddy, my partner, Scotty, for Audad, but it's a target-rich environment. You learn a lot, right? Yeah. You're on lots of stocks. They're hard to kill, but you see a lot of them. And people will come down there, and it's kind of an ongoing joke. We have to learn real quick if I'm taking them or Scotty, right? Because they made a meme about it with this Yellowstone deal, something about pushing horses, and Rip's like, well, fuck it. Like, we'll just run them down the hill. That's me on a stalk, right? Without Dad, like Scotty will.
We're out of choices. Fuck it. Then.
Yeah. Scotty's like, if you go in there and you're going to have 15 to 20 stalks a day, you're going to be wound for sound all day long. You're going to have high pressure shots, and it may not be good for you. You go with me, I'm going to get you one very, very good shot, right?
Yeah. Everything's going to be perfect.
Yeah, like Scotty will wait, where I kind of run it. I'm more aggressive. The thing with that, you have to know animals, right? You can't do that on deer, right?
Yeah.
You'll never get another shot.
Right.
Certainly can't do it on like a bighorn. But without Dad, I'm like, well, they're not leaving. You know what I mean? Big
elk
range,
with a bow,
right?
you can do it though. You're like, well, that one didn't work. Let's just keep going. Next basin over, there'll be another bull that's over there screaming, being dumb too.
And that with 100%, and that is part of also knowing your parameters, and that only comes from experience. So you get on a giant deer in the high country. And with pressure, I get it. You may have to push the situation. Rather than pushing a bad wind, you better just hang back, keep your eyes on him, and wait for a better day. Because once he's gone, he may be gone for 4 or 5 days or ever. Once he drops in the timber, he's archery-wise, he's gone. Right? You're not getting him. And I've seen people do that where they get so close, sub 100 yards, and the wind's a little swirly, and they do not have. It's like having a naked chick in front of you, not sleeping her. It's hard to back out, right? And it's like, look, I've texted guys.
That toothpaste is out of the tube.
Yeah, it's like back out, and that adrenaline and whatever. Well, you blow that thing out a couple times, I guarantee that third time you've learned. You've touched the stove like. Better back out.
Yeah.
Well, when I give advice, especially when I sound like a smartass or whatever, it's because, look, I've done that a lot, right? And that cone of shame for the mile hike back that you didn't kill anything, you're only going to make that walk a couple times. Each time when you learn from that, you're going to become a better hunter. And that's whether we're talking about lowering, like technology-wise, I would say like where I see it like optics. You're still going to go out and get it done with optics, but you're probably going to have some with crappier optics. You're probably gonna have some migraines, not to see as much. Things like that.
But your evenings are gonna end quicker. Your mornings are gonna take longer.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Probably like 30 minutes compared to some. But when you get to other technology that makes a huge difference, like people get all wound up about mechanical broadhead.
Oh yeah.
People get wound up. Lighted Nox was the big one. Truly, those things aren't that big of a deal in comparison to other parts of technology, rangefinders being a big one, or ranging sights. But what have you seen change? Because it's funny bouncing this back and forth, business-wise, like in 10 years.
Oh my gosh, the way that we consume content now is so much different.
Yeah,
I mean, podcasts, social media. You can't go anywhere and there's not somebody sitting on their phone flipping through Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, TikTok or whatever the next thing is. And so how we consume content is completely changed. And honestly, I struggle. One of the things I struggle with is authenticity. You were talking about a person that has 100,000, Instagram followers versus somebody that has 1,400. That doesn't mean they're authentic, and that doesn't mean that what they do is true, and that doesn't mean that you can actually learn something from them. And I think people, rely on social media a little bit too much. I do see that there is positive things. For instance, YouTube has opened up the hunting industry to a whole new group of people that would have never ever been exposed to it otherwise. I think it's a positive thing. And I think I got this question asked to me. We did this roundtable at on X at their employee meetings, like 400 employees sitting there just shooting questions at us. And one of the first questions I got was, how do you think social media affects hunting? Is it good or bad? I said, well, you can't say that. Because I don't care what it is, it can be used for bad. I could take my boot off, which I rely on to walk across a gravel parking lot, and I can beat the shit out of you with it, and it became a weapon. It's a bad thing. Social media is the same thing. You can learn some awesome stuff from authentic people, but you can also go down a rabbit hole where you shouldn't be following that person, or you shouldn't be listening to that person, or you fall into a trap where it's just a giant gossip thing. What's not
consuming
positive.
Your life.
Yeah, it's consuming your life. So anything can be used bad, and anything can be used good. So I'd say that's a big one. The other thing with business is Our industry has gone through, hunting industry has gone through a very unique change recently in the last 5-6 years. And you've seen this. Patrick, those guys, Dana Gleason, my dad, that age group they held our generation off from being inside the industry, not running the companies and understanding it. And then they all retired and left this giant sucking hole. And so now you have younger people in here, which is good. Young blood's great. But unfortunately, they're making decisions that they don't really have the instincts in business to make.
Yeah.
And that's been a big thing for us.
Yeah, the one thing, like looking, especially knowing your family and following along far before I met you, back in the day, your grandpa was one of the ones pioneered video, right?
Yeah.
Hunting videos. So you had that, right? And then, you had print and, then as time went on, you had social media, right?
Yep.
Or forums, excuse me.
Right.
Then forums, then you had social media.
Yep.
Then, and I will say, a buddy of mine, Avery, Ryan, Rockslide Ryan.
Yeah.
He told me years ago, he says, I guarantee podcasts are going to take over everything. And he was like, how you have XFM, you're going to have podcasts. And he was like, that will become the primary source of all information. And me only have listened to the Rogan podcast.
Right.
So, little did I know I would be one of the podcast guys. Because that time I hid from everyone. I didn't like, I still don't, but I have, whatever. So so now you've got, forums aren't as big. There's still shit talking on forums or whatever. And print's gone down, probably more for whitetail hunters, has gone downhill from my perception than Western.
Yeah.
The whitetail side, I think print took a big hit.
Yeah.
But Western, I don't think it took it as bad. But when that happens, you guys adapted, get podcasts and whatever, all the shit you guys do. Well, what's next, right? Like people are like, what do you think's next? I'm like, honestly, I think a pay to play is going to be a lot bigger soon. Like we're looking at doing like on our page, we'll have you guys be involved on some of this stuff, but the Kifaru University.
Yeah.
So if there's info where, let's say, like Dan's talk, because I'm big into archery, Dan's got a huge, video on something that I'm just, okay, this is good. Like call you guys, hey, can we put that ours with the link to your site? To where then, I don't want to argue about this shit.
Right.
Like just come find it on our page and you can email me if we want to talk. But like, I don't know, and I'm using Dan, he's more of a bow hunter than you are. So like if Dan shot 50 animals in the last 5 years, you probably should listen to Dan, right?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so when you get on, when we were talking like with the forums or whatever, especially when you talk about penetration and blood trailing and things like that, I have found it difficult for me to have communication with one guy who shot one doe and have a conversation with him. Rather than getting into that argument, the pay to play, get on to learn. You've got skin in the game now, and you are here to learn. Not to argue, not to stir up shit, not to troll. I think it's going to start going that way. Are you?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And that's why Dan was part of his, passion was teaching people. He's really good at it. And he and Brian Barney came to me recently in the last couple of years and said, hey, we want to write a book, but not write a book.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know, what are you saying? And so they came up with what we call the mule deer course. And it is online learning. It's $100 and you get on there and there's 100 and some hours worth of video and content on how to hunt mule deer from A to Z. And they have my brother on there talking about the rifle side they go through gear, they go through behavior, all of that stuff to get those guys. To get the beginner can learn everything, or a guy can learn 2 or 3 things that, I'm a pretty good mule deer hunter, but I want to, Dan killed a huge deer, Brian's killed a huge deer, guys killed a bunch of big deer. I can learn something from them.
Yeah.
And you're right. That's the next thing. And then I think the next beyond that is live events where you get 50 guys into a group and you learn something very intentional, very intense, very quick.
We're executing that now. Like we have a glassing camp that we're doing here. And, we charge quite a bit for that camp. It's intensive, but what I want to see, especially with what you're talking about on those paid events is I call you guys and we do one and we set it up. Okay, now, like I'm not a trophy hunter, and which we make jokes about, but I'm a good gear guy and I got real good field craft, right? And
right.
So I'll stick with that, right? Like, I don't dive into my other lanes. Then I'm going to hand it off to you for whatever. And then that way, again, there's skin in the game. And you also, when it's almost like being homeschooled.
Yep.
compared to a large, whatever, 4A, giant school.
Yep.
You learn more when you're homeschooled, right? Or we have a tutor. When you come to that and then you learn that way, you have been learning from a forum or from social. Then you come to one of those events. I think that, well, I know it's an eye opener for people. It's a big eye opener, and not only that too. It's like when you how would I there is no drama in
Yes,
that. So
exactly.
That's another part of it. Yeah,
it's very drama free, and it's very learning because everybody had to pay to get there, so they're very intentional. They want to get their money's worth.
Yeah, and again, dinner afterwards, throw back some beers, family, more.
Exactly.
Because I think family. Sloan Brown, he just brought this up on a podcast. But the one thing, I'm not a big crowd person. I don't like shows, but I like the family aspect of this. I like that at the end of this seminar, we'll all sit down, bullshit, tell stories or whatever. It's not the same on social, and you see on social the best of someone.
Yes,
and it's a lie. Yeah, and when I say the best, whether that be wounding some shit, missing some shit, or your life, right?
Yeah.
Like,
that
I know
family vacation wasn't that cool.
Well, I know 3 different couples right now not doing well, and on social media, I'm like, what? You guys
100%.
look perfect. I'm like, holy cow! And so I try to, on my social media page, post the good and the bad, and make fun of myself. Whether it's I'm having a fat month and I probably should have dieted, or I just wounded something. Explain what happened, how I fixed it, or missed, or whatever. You don't get that. You don't get that a lot. Like it's
I think that's one of the things that's appealing to that why you have a huge following and is appealing about you is you're very authentic and almost raw authentic. And
it's got me in trouble.
And honestly, I would love to be that way. I took a different road and decided that I don't voice my opinions very often because I am extremely blunt, as you know. You used to call me the funniest blunt person you met. Yeah. I used to be really, really blunt, and I got slapped a couple times physically, and a couple times just socially or verbally, and decided, you know what, maybe that's not the best thing.
Yeah, no, I mean it's true, and I don't like I posted. Where it's got like the chimp and it goes into the
where then the guy turns around and goes,
we fucked up, we gotta go. Yeah, I lost like. We looked. I think I lost. Now I gained 160, but I think I lost 90 followers that day. and I have a fairly broad sense of humor and also fairly jacked up, right? So, for on my end with that is I just pretty black and white. You got a wiener, you got a vagina, right. Move on, right? Okay, well. I should
Signs
not.
on bathroom doors have been doing it for decades.
Yeah, well, I should not. For me, it's just funny. It's something I'd say in camp or whatever. People take that shit a lot more serious than I realized, right? And so I'm like getting like a full on like a thesis of how I'm wrong, and I'm like, it was just a meme, boys. Like Jesus, joke. Yeah, and people take it serious. I had another one that got me in trouble where it was the big fat dude on the forklift driving back from getting his 3rd vaccination. Because my big stance that got me in trouble on that was. Obesity's a big one in the world today, right? And that more people die from that. And me, too, a can of Copenhagen a day. I don't see anybody protesting that. Yeah. Might get my jaw cut off. See, everybody's fine with it. And then the COVID thing happens, and it's like, I never got the vaccine myself. And if you wanted to, great. I don't give a shit, right? But I was like, man, maybe we should focus on fitness, right? More than health and fitness, right? Dieting. And so that got me in some trouble posting that. I had a lot of hate mail from that one. And I'm like, look, I am just saying from an outside perspective, I am not a doctor. No one knows about this. It hasn't been tested long enough. And we have found there's some adverse reactions to the vaccine.
They're dealing with it right now.
Most of when you have multiple comorbidities, I don't want to get into all this, but a lot of fat people died.
Yeah.
Bottom line, right? And so I'm like, fitness. So, hey, why don't we start, instead of all this money we're spending on things that may not important, maybe we should give free gym memberships and they continue as you go, and maybe some free dieting, right? And focus on that. Fuck, that got me in trouble. Like, I was like, I'm just not going to answer anymore. Like, this is not worth it because my view on this is obviously not the same as others. Like, I didn't have a mask on after we moved, driving through Denver. Went into Vitamin Cottage. They have these peanut butter bar things I like, or whatever they call it, natural grocers.
Yep.
Some big Herkin, fuck ass crack coming out of the front of her shirt.
Shirk.
I cankles, man, and I didn't have a mask on, and she is screaming at me, and I'm giggling a little, I'm like, and I'm trying not to, say I'm trying to be professional, right? And I was like, ma'am, you got a lot of problems. That mask is
It's
not
not
fixing.
helping
Yeah,
you.
it's not the mask that's gonna save you, and that's gotten me. If you want to wear a mask, by all means, I don't care. You can hunt and peak underwear with a slingshot. If that's what makes you happy, don't force that shit on me. And so that got me in a lot of trouble. And I'm staying out. That monkey post was the last one. I'm not fucking with this whole gender thing. I don't have time. But you're from Wyoming, right? Like,
It's a different place here.
Yeah.
It really is. We never did the mask thing. Our kids were only out of school for like a month and a half. I mean, COVID really didn't affect our state. And actually, this county was the worst death, and it was very minimal. More people died from drunk driving in this state than that. And I mean, it is what it is, and I'm glad it's gone, and I'm glad that we're moving on, hopefully. But
when I drove to Arizona to hunt, I drove through a Indian reservation, which I didn't know it's still a big thing.
oh
there.
yeah,
And I saw a sign on the window, but I didn't pay attention to it. It's obviously serious there because they started yelling at me, and I was like, I thought we were past this shit, right?
I thought that was 2020.
So
this is 23.
I did the shirt over my, that didn't fly. They kicked me out of the store. I'm like, well, I guess I got a ways before I can, buy a water. So, I mean, and those are the things where I just need to stay. You kind of have to make a decision, like Trump Jr.
Yeah.
Meme war king, right?
Yeah.
My thing, I need to keep my employees employed, right? I need to keep producing good products,
Yes.
right? Focus on American made, all that stuff, and not post fat dudes on forklifts because it's just not. While funny, it's really not really worth my time to argue.
So let's talk about it. So you guys moved here to Wyoming from Colorado. Moved to Wyoming. How many employees do you guys have? Are you hoping
43 right now,
and you're hoping closer to 90?
I would say in the next year. Yeah, it depends on honestly the building. Like,
Right.
we've filled this up fairly quick. When we've got a lot of new stuff coming out, as well, that'll take up some space. But like what we're hoping to have a minimum of 20 more sowers in the next year. If things go smooth, 40. And then obviously that things kind of
Right.
ebb and flow on what else we might need and things like that.
So let's talk about Kifaru real quick. So you guys are American made. I mean, we walked through this building and there's people sewing stuff, and there's they're shipping the backpacks from here and the whole 9 yards. What's the mission statement? What do you guys stand for? What if I was at home thinking about a new pack? What would differentiate your brand? I mean, there's a lot of great brands. Don't get me wrong, but you guys have uniqueness. What is that?
So like the mission statement, if I had to church it up to what I had to type out was, Kifaru International's mission is to create jobs for Americans. I'm screwing this up. I had time to type it out. Create jobs for Americans with all American-made backpacks, whatever, all that. But truly, what we want to do is employ as many Americans as we can and keep everything sewn here in the United States. So when I say that, that's needle, thread, zippers, buckle, everything, except our T-shirts and hats. We don't.
Yeah.
We need to find an American company that can make a hat that looks worth a shit. But
Yeah.
so with this, we've been doing this for like 30 years, basically. We haven't wavered from that, but with that, mission statement and our views, and then the way ahead, it is getting more difficult, right, to sew things in the U.S. And one of those things is, when you look at it, is I'll have people post about how patriotic, pro-American they are.
Yeah.
And then they look at the price tag, right? And I get it, right? But we don't want to change from that. And so we just need to, keep doing our thing and
Stay in your lane.
because we don't want to go overseas. We looked into it a few years ago, and it just felt, I say dirty, but it just felt like selling the American flag, right? American made, and then going overseas. And we did it because we were just worried price, right? Like, it's expensive to sew here. I'll give you an example. We sent, nothing wrong. I mean, whatever. Like I get it, right? It's expensive. It was 48% less
Wow.
to have the pack sewn overseas.
Jeez.
So, significant difference.
Well, back during Trump's administration, it was becoming more and more difficult to have stuff built overseas. And so I was talking to a lot of manufacturers. What's the deal? Is it better? Is it not better? And we actually did some research on it with our own audience. And they say they'll pay 20% more, but that's not 100% true. A portion of them will, but most of them, even though they're I buy American made no matter what, you don't really.
Yeah.
You say you would until if you did, Walmart wouldn't be Walmart.
Yep. No, and I mean, I can say like the clothing company that I'm working with now, like we're mostly sewn overseas.
Yeah.
And so they'll do some boosted post, and people, where's it sewn? Where's it sewn? Where's it sewn? If it's not sewn in America, not buying it. And then I'll look at their profile. They've got Nike shoes on, total anti-2, anti-hunting, very liberal, very left-wing.
Right.
They're wearing a pack not made in the United States. They're whatever. Now, I don't comment on it, but I'm like, that is the monster I have to compete against, right?
100%.
And with that, obviously, like people will say, well, what kind of phone do you use? Motherfucker, there's no American-made cell phones.
They don't exist.
Yeah, they don't exist. Oh, I have a Ford, you got a Dodge, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, is that all made in the U.S.? I'm like, you know what? I don't know, but they're not my sponsor, right? I do have to get from A to B. I'm not taking a rickshaw to work, right? So that Ford, from the values of the people I know at Ford, one of the reasons I drive a Ford is I like those values. Dodge is the same way. Now, is some of the shit from overseas? Probably.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pull the fucker apart and look at the name tag, right? I mean, I have to have a vehicle. So, but the things
throw the truck out. The mats are made in Taiwan.
Yeah, exactly. Indonesia. But if you look at, let's say, some of the more things that are controllable, your weapon, right?
Right.
Your optics, right? And when I say that, I mean, when I say the optics, even if the optics are built overseas, what is the company's stand? Right? Yeah, so like are they very pro-military? Are they very pro-2A? That is a big part of it as well. So that's kind of what I look at, when people are asking me the different things, my views on this, because, I use a lot of MSR stuff. Mm-hmm. Are they anti-pro hunting? They seem kind of neutral. They hide.
Right.
I can tell you right now, you go to Arc'teryx, even though they're a big tactical supplier, they are farther left than they are to the right.
Yes.
And so Patagonia, another one.
Patagucci.
And I've made statements that have got me in trouble where I don't even want to bring it up now, but a specific stove company that everyone uses, and it's like South didn't believe me. And I'm like, look, dude, I went to the OR show and they about kicked me out of the booth.
Right.
South went to that booth. He's not running that stove anymore.
Yep.
He called me, goes, dude, I could not believe it. You're right. And
Yeah.
I was like, just because they sell to hunters, they like hunters' money.
Yeah.
They are not using that to help hunters. They are 100%. Not using that for conservation. So some of the things, as we're diving down this rabbit hole, that have enamored me lately and made me think is, as hunters, we will focus on one specific thing, like what's the newest? I don't even want to bring it up. I did a podcast with Josh Bomar, right?
Okay.
And the poaching thing and all the different crap he went through and what he actually played. And I just asked him it was very awkward for me, questions. There was more traction from that than wolves coming to Colorado.
Which is crazy, really
right?
insane.
So whether he was guilty or not, whether you like the guy or not, like whatever, the amount of hate that went towards him, and rightfully so for some of it, no one really gave a shit about what's happening in Colorado right now.
That's really affecting everybody's everyday life in the hunting industry.
Right. Josh Bomar, if you don't want to see his buff ass, I don't like Chinese food. I don't go pick it.
Right.
I just don't go to I don't go to that restaurant.
Right.
So I get it. There's some talk there, whatever. But it's like, hey, we're focusing all this attention on that or pick whatever else, rather than like what's most important to me.
Well, and you know Butch Whiting. He and I recently had this big long conversation about Butch Whiting from Cryptic. He and I had this big long conversation that you have to pick the brands that you're going to support to step behind. And are they all American made? Not all of them, but at least they're pro, they're patriots, they're pro 2A, they're pro Constitution, they're God family country, and stand behind those brands, because that's what your beliefs. If that's your beliefs, if that's not your beliefs, go support Patagucci or whatever brand that is, but support the brands, be mindful and conscious of that. Yeah. So what do you guys think, or what are you guys doing as far as Kifaru new innovations, new things that are coming down the pipe. Obviously, it's constant. You can't stop. We talked about that already.
So this is kind of bring up maybe an analogy because, like, Patrick was a pioneer.
Yeah.
He got old and he kind of got complacent.
Yeah.
Right. And in the
happens.
70s, it's going to happen to me. I'm going to hide in the next 5. So that in that time, the building was smaller, whatever. So we got passed on some things. Whether that be like now we're not the lightest or whatever, and or we're able to expand now that we've moved, right?
Yep.
We did that for a reason. I tried to explain it like if you're into photography, Canon led the world for a long time.
Right.
Sony came on strong and technically probably passed them. If you read any of the articles about that, the higher ups at Canon were like, "Hey, it's expensive to be innovative. We innovated for a long time. We're hanging back. Now they've come back and just started crushing everyone."
Right.
That's our plan, and we're executing it very well. So I can't go into great depth, but obviously on my end, I want to be the lightest, most durable backpack again, and we should be in the next 6 months. Things like bino harnesses that people have asked us to do, and I think we can make better. And some of the innovations we have from tactical friends of ours that can integrate stuff, we're going to be able to do that now where we couldn't before. The biggest thing, the catch-all with this is the American-made part of it. Yeah. There are things we cannot do here. We can't build shelters at a high capacity with American-made fabric here. And when I say that, people bring up other companies. It's like, yeah, you kind of can, right? And if we only did shelters, we could. But when I say shelters, I'm not talking about floorless shelters. Mm-hmm. You can't, to my knowledge, you cannot build a high-end dual-wall tent in the United States.
It's not legal through the EPA and everything else that you have to get licensed for, right?
Some of it's that, and then some of it's just they don't do it, right? Yeah. They don't. So do we start a tent manufacturing line here? Well, we're going to have to hire people from overseas to do it, right? You got to have somebody who knows what they're doing. So some of the stuff we're going to have to figure out as we go. Because I would like bivvies and stuff are easy. I would like to do tents. I don't know that we can do it and stay here. Right. Now that's going to be like up to public opinion. Like, hey, are you guys going to flip out if we come out with a shelter made in Myanmar or whatever that we designed? Because we can't do it here. But I don't want to take a black eye from that to make that decision, right? But the backpacks, the jackets, all the sleeping bags, all that's going to stay here. But again, with technology kind of catching up with some of my designs, I think in the next 6 to 8 months should be a really good eye-opener. It's just we had to 3 years basically kind of stay. We came out with new packs or whatever, but there was just certain things we couldn't do. And size was, you got to figure, we've gained by 11,000%. We've 11,000. We are 11 to 12 times bigger than we were when I started.
Wow.
So it's hard to keep that fucking train on the tracks.
Yeah.
And let's face it, I am
in a move in the middle of that.
And a move, yeah. So when I say that, that's not in the last year. Since 2012, we are 11 to 12 times bigger than when I started.
You're doubling every year, basically.
Yes. And with that was with huge constraints and a very small marketing budget. And this is just, and a lot of learning on my part, right? And I still screw up. I think not paying attention, I'll give you an example. One of the products we have out there, we have 3 years of inventory, right? Me not paying attention, right? Yeah, exactly. So those will be on sale for a while. But learning all that along the way, and then obviously the crew that I have, and then being able to execute it now. And then as we bring back sewing in-house, we'll be very dynamic with what we can do. Limited color runs. So we want to do, because we always say we're not going to do cryptic or first light or whatever again, but we want to order 200 yards of, make 100 packs in cryptic. We can just do it here, right? It's on the floor and it's super simple. So, but with all that, if I don't become a full-blown alcoholic or have a panic attack in the middle of all that, we'll see how it goes. But so far, it's going good.
Find you in a closet somewhere sucking your thumb with a bottle of a Screwball peanut butter whiskey.
Jesus, yeah. Well, a lot of people have asked, say, what's your goal? It's like, to hide. That's my goal. And
that's why I moved to Riverton.
Yeah,
middle of the smallest state in the union.
Well, and I mean, people are like, haha, laughing. I'm like, yeah, I'm not fucking around. That's my goal is to hide. When I say hide, I still want to do some public speaking and classes, but social media for the most part gone, and just disappear. Because the other thing's lifestyle, your people say money doesn't buy everything. That's somewhat true. It does buy some cool shit.
Yeah.
But it won't buy you more sleep. I can tell you that because I've spent about as much money as I can to sleep more. But when I go to I'm going to help out Bart Lancaster way up in North BC.
Yep.
Once my cell phone doesn't work anymore, I sleep like a baby, right? Less stress or whatever. And so for me, it's just going to be my way of life needs to alter as I get older so I have less stress. So
yeah, that's awesome. So family, daughter, she's got to be in her 20s now, doesn't she?
yeah, she's 21. God help us all. I'm a grandpa.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm a grandpa. The kid's different than me in the same a lot of ways, different than others. Like I had money saved for her to just go travel the world, right?
Yeah.
Like I had to wait to do that and was able to later. And she wants to be a mom. That's all she ever wanted to be.
Wow.
She's wanted to be a mom. She's a mom, right?
She live in Colorado?
Texas right now. She lived actually in Colorado, worked for me. Her and her boyfriend at the time, but now husband, worked for me. They moved back down to the hill country, like Comfort, Dripping Springs area. And she's kind of hacking it out on her own, figuring shit out. I help her every now and then, but that was interesting because for me, I just wanted her to go
explore.
I wanted her to be me, and I quickly found out she didn't want to be me. wasn't mad about it. I was just like, that's what you want to do. Yeah. At least you're getting it out of the way early, so when you're 40, your kid's grown up, and maybe then you can do whatever. And then, recently, I shouldn't even tell this story, but it's kind of comical. I was raised extremely poor, right? Very, very, very poor. My mom and dad's house burnt down in that big fire in Oregon.
I did not know that.
Everything my childhood's burnt to the ground. So, we never had really nice vehicles or whatever. I'm not crying the blues. It made me a better person, stronger person. But my parents did not have a lot of money. And so my mom calls me. I wasn't close with my grandma and grandpa. My mom calls. She's like, hey, your grandma died. I'm like, oh, okay. I said, you guys okay? Whatever. I'm guiding, right? And I have my mom on speaker all the time because she's a hoot, right? She's funny. So there's 15 seconds of silence. She's like, so we're millionaires now. I forgot my grandparents had a lot of money.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. So I'm thinking that the Clampetts go to Maui type thing. So my dad has a Ford trimmer now. They have a Can-Am. They have a custom home.
So they're no longer cutting firewood.
Yeah. So I was like, well, good or whatever. So that was kind of cool. I don't have to worry about, my mom specifically as she gets older. And then, the crew here, the move, not to bounce around, moving all the employees was a big one. And so just about every employee here has bought a house since they've been here. Kind of one of the beauties of Wyoming, a little bit less money. Yeah. And, learning the local, the construction portion of certain things and how life works. I've from a small town, but kind of learning who's who and what's what.
You're kind of learning. Do you remember the old TV show Green Acres?
Oh yeah.
You're learning that the guy that runs the mercantile also is the mayor, who is also on the board for this and can control that. And
it's so funny you bring up Green Acres because we were talking about. Because how old are you now?
46.
Okay, we're the same age.
Yes.
Right. Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies. What's the one with Don Knotts, Mayberry? Leave It to Beaver.
Leave It to Beaver. Yep.
When I was a kid, right? That you probably watched with your grandpa. And so Green Acres was one of them, and I was like, "You go, guys, Green Acres." Yeah, they're looking at my corns growing out of my ass, right? So I pull it up on YouTube, and I was like, "This is kind of Riverton," and I brought up exactly what you did. I was like, "Well, this guy's on this council and this council and this council," and when you kind of draw that circle around, you're like, we need to keep that guy happy, So yeah,
you better invite. Come to find out, we better invite the guy that's running the street sweeper to lunch a lot.
Yeah. So just learning the community, but some of the things were rough getting the building built, but the rest of it has been amazing. To a point, people have told me to shut up, and not talk about Wyoming anymore because it is.
Yeah. Well, I'm one of those people growing up here. Actually, did you know I lived in Riverton twice in my life?
No, Scott told me that. Yeah.
But I'm one of those people like, shh, we don't need any more people here.
Yeah. Well, I've had a couple altercations because I had Colorado plates. Right?
Oh,
and giant
greenies.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's giant, small penis truck, whatever. And the one guy, I was trying to be polite. He was yelling at me, on and on. And I finally jumped out. I was pissed. I was like, look, motherfucker, I'm Republican. Fuck off. And he was like, whoa, this guy's not from Colorado. I'm like, look, we just moved, and he was super. He invited me to hunt on his land or whatever.
there you
But
go.
dude, he was like a 60-year-old farmer, just not scared of shit, right? Like screaming at me in the truck. And finally, I have those automatic. My truck's like worth more by probably a multiplier of 4 than my first house I lived in. Right?
Yeah.
It's got the little step down,
Oh,
pops down, whatever.
I have those. Those are awesome.
Yeah, they are awesome. Hop on that, whatever. I'm yelling at the dude, and then we ended up. He's like, "You want to come over for a beer?" That's Wyoming. They'll probably shoot you, but they'll give you beer too. Like
Yep.
that's the easiest way I could explain it.
It's kind of like living in Ireland. I'll beat the crap out of you, and then we'll drink beers later.
Yeah, have a pint. Yeah, yeah. No, it's been super cool, and it's cool too. Like you guys here. Obviously, there's multiple other outdoor companies here, and
Yeah.
I know of 9 other outdoor companies trying to move here
Yeah,
right now.
I
So
do
it's
too.
Pretty crazy.
It's absolutely crazy, and it's a neat state. Our workforce is one of our struggles. You haven't faced that. That's why I asked you that question. I sat on the a board that for the previous governor, and we were really instrumental on Weatherby moving here, and we would have been instrumental on that had the governor not changed. Anyway, one of the biggest problems that we face in this state is the workforce and a qualified workforce, but it's changing quickly, very quickly.
Yeah, it is, and on our end, like we're gonna make them qualified as kind of Bender called it the Kifaru University, not the educational hunting portion and survival, but you're going to go through there's going to be a contract, honestly, and we're going to send you through a sewing course because we don't want to put that much time and effort into training people.
And then to have them go work at the Maverick next week because the benefits are better.
Yeah, something. Yeah, exactly. Or just the fact that they get 3 months into it and they're like, oh, we actually have to work.
Yeah, exactly.
So, a little bit of a vetting period or whatever. But so far it's gone, fairly well. And we'll hire people out of state too. I mean, it's easy enough. A lot of people think they want to move to Wyoming. This winter may have slowed that train down a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, where I live, we live really rural, and I woke up one day and realized that all the people surrounding me are not from Wyoming. They're from Oregon, Colorado, Washington. I have some people from California that live right next door to me, and I tease them a lot. Like you guys finally got a winner. You've been living here for 4 years, and we haven't had a winner until now.
Yeah, and it hasn't been like if this is the worst it's got. Amy and I were talking about it. We lived at 10,000 feet in Colorado, so there was more snow there. I will say the -40 thing is a bit much for me. Like we recently been doing some winter camping. I'm getting too old for that shit. We woke up, it was -13, climbing out of my tent and like, let's build a bonfire, right? Like, in fact, I'd have drone. I'm like, I want people to see this in space. I'm cold, right? So
See that big standing dead timber? It's going to entire be lit standing there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, which, whatever. But I mean, if this is as bad as it gets, I could deal with this every year. The biggest thing is just I'm worried more about the animals. Right?
Yeah, and it's been
winter.
rough. It's been rough on them, really has.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. We just finally got a bad one, and it's been about 5 years since we had it. So
yeah, I think they told us we're here 28 years since it's been here.
Yeah.
This bad. There was twice I passed my house because the blizzard was so bad. I had to turn on MapQuest. When I
And you're
turned
like,
around.
"Oops."
Well, I couldn't see the turn off, and I called Amy because this is new to her, right? And I'm like, hey, turn your flashers on, and go slow, be ready, whatever. Oh, it'll be fine. And she was like, she got home like white. She's like, I told you couldn't see the road from the whole trip from Riverton to the house.
You can't see that you're driving on rumble strips and.
Oh, so when I drove back from this last trip guiding, I bit that last storm. I hit Casper like right in the thick of it. Oof. They hadn't closed. I would have drove around, honestly, the gate anyway. But I got about 20 minutes into it, and it was like there's a row of cars, and finally most of them pulled over. I got ahead of them. They kind of followed me. I got crazy lights. Well, then of course I'm pulling over. People are pulled over. I'm like, hey, get fucking behind us. Like, do not park here because
you're
they're
just gonna get
stuck.
Some semi's gonna
or clip you.
Yep.
And because they were like, we're gonna wait it out, and then I'm like, get on the train behind me. So there was a caravan by the time we got to Shoshone, and the gate was closed. Right, they blocked it. I pulled into that gas station, and I called Amy. I was like, I made it. We're through. And she's like, how bad was it? I was like, that's the worst I've ever seen. I mean, 2 hours straight, I couldn't see. The road, but it was an adventure, but that should detour some this winter should stop some people, I would imagine, moving into to Wyoming. So
we'll see.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time. I know we got stuff to go on today. We got Wyoming Bow Hunters tonight, their convention, so that'll be fun. We'll probably end up bidding on some stuff and see what. Hopefully, we don't end up with a bear trap again, right?
Yeah, the last time I think we cut a $5,800 check for like 4 hats, a flag, and a bear trapper.
It's funny. Aaron and I both ended up with, obviously not the same bear trap, but same. We got in the same bear trap, using it fondly at an event just like this. Like, how did I end up with a $500 fabricated bear trap?
Well, the problem is I don't like losing, right? And I was drinking, and the dude obviously had some free income like I did, and I wanted that trap. And dude, I paid $2,300 for that.
Oh
trap.
my gosh, I think I paid $5 for mine, or
yeah.
$7, something like that.
The dude loved it. He was there. He bought a pack from us. But I got to the point I was licking my bid card and
sticking it to your
my
forehead.
head. I was an idiot, but I ended up with a bear trap. I got it. So let's hopefully it doesn't go down to that level tonight.
Oh, geez. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Thanks for the tour, and I look forward to hanging out some more. And now that you're just down the road, I'll pop in here more often.